Now, Senator Elizabeth Warren is now demanding answers when it comes to America's role in the Saudi-led bombing of Yemen. Now, according to The Intercept, which did a great article on this and have been following the conflict in Yemen for quite some time, earlier this week, Warren has sent a letter to General Joseph Votel, head of U.S. Central Command and top commander for the U.S. forces in the Middle East. Now, in this letter, she requested that he clarify some of his past congressional testimony about the United States' role in the ongoing Yemen war, which really it seems to be more of a massacre than anything else, as millions of Yemenis are dying and millions more are literally right now starving to death. Now, Warren's letter actually referenced an earlier article by The Intercept about an airstrike that happened back in May. Now, that's based on a U.S. intelligence report that recounts in detail, minute by minute, how the strike had unfolded and American munitions were used. So what happens is that we sell weapons to pretty much everybody. We sell weapons to Saudi Arabia. Now, I don't know if we give them at a discount or anything like that, but we do sell weapons to Saudi Arabia. And guess what? Saudi Arabia uses those weapons on Yemenis. So it doesn't matter if they're innocent people. And in fact, a lot of innocent people have been unfortunately killed by these weapons. Now, Votel, however, had previously suggested, and this is what Warren was asking about, to clarify that the U.S. actually had no knowledge or very little knowledge about how the Saudi Arabian government and the UAE ended up using American weapons. And they say, no, we don't track the aircraft missions that we help refuel. We just refuel them. All we're doing is we're doing strategic support when it comes to refueling Saudi aircraft and then selling them weapons that they probably don't use or that we are not sure if they use on civilians in Yemen. Now that, of course, is bullshit. It doesn't pass the smell test. So, of course, Warren asks about that. But before we go to that, let me go to Warren before. During a congressional hearing in March, Warren asked Votel whether CENTCOM tracks what aircraft do after the United States refuels them. His answer is, quote, "Senator, we do not." Votel also denied knowing whether U.S.-produced munitions were used in specific strikes when the media has reported on civilian deaths. Now, that article earlier this month by The Intercept published a detailed article about a coalition airstrike back in May, which targeted a site in Yemen's northern Sadr governorate where a dozen family members were sleeping in tents. Now, the bomb missed, so the civilians survived. If the bomb had not missed, then you would have had an entire family slaughtered. These are innocent people, right? Now, the article in question quoted an intelligence report that includes what appear to be comments from an American intelligence analyst who closely supervised the strike from a coalition command center in Riyadh, suggesting that the U.S. military observers actually do have detailed information about how these strikes unfold. But wait a minute, when you ask Mr. Votel, he says, we don't know. We don't know nothing about nothing. I mean, Saudi Arabia, we're just refueling them. That's all. We don't know if our weapons are being used to massacre innocent civilians. We don't know about these strikes. We don't know where they're going, except that you totally know where you're going because we have the intelligence reports that were obtained by The Intercept that posted this. Basically, Votel was caught lying with his pants down to Senator Warren, and now Warren is like, hey, wait a minute. You lied to my face. Now let's get the real truth. Let's get the details about this. So, Warren's letter references the intelligence report posted in The Intercept, asking how U.S. intelligence analysts could have produced such a complete picture of the strike if, as Votel claimed, the Pentagon is doing so little to tracking the missions. Quote, she wrote, this report appeared to indicate that one or more U.S. representatives were present in the Saudi command center at the time the strike was approved and executed. the reported presence of U.S. advisors in a command center responsible for actively approving and directing such airstrikes, and the reported existence of at least one U.S. intelligence assessment of an airstrike acknowledging the use of U.S. manufactured munitions raise questions about whether the U.S. does in fact have the capability to track the origins, purpose, and results of U.S.-supported airstrikes should it choose to do so. Fascinating. Now, Warren's letter also contains a list of detailed questions about U.S. oversight of Saudi bombings, asking about the role of U.S. advisors in the targeting process, and whether U.S. military officers are present in coalition command centers, overseeing operations. The letter also asks whether the Pentagon conducts after-action assessments or intelligence reports summarizing coalition airstrikes in Yemen, such as the one reported by The Intercept. The letter asks the Defense Department to provide unclassified answers to the extent possible and request copies of those intelligence reports. So this is big, right? Now, it's not getting reported a lot in the media, but here you have a sitting U.S. senator who's been basically lied to, saying, no, wait a minute, you lied to us earlier. Why don't you actually give us the details, right? Because I want to know what we're doing there. How much do we know what is actually going on? What are you not telling us? And again, she's a member of Congress. You would think she would actually know. But it turns out Congress doesn't even know what the military is doing on our behalf and what kind of knowledge we have on Saudi-led bombings that we are actively supporting with munitions and refueling. We're involved in that civil war. And our weapons have been found being used in that area against civilian targets. Let me give you some details here on that. The Intercept notes that since the beginning of the war, U.S.-backed airstrikes have hit countless civilian targets, including schools, hospitals, and food and water infrastructure. Last week, the U.S.-backed coalition bombed a school bus in North Yemen, reportedly killing dozens of boys between the ages of 6 and 11. You know what the response to that was? UNICEF called the strike the worst attack on children since Yemen's brutal war escalated in 2015. The UN, the Secretary General, called for a, quote, independent and prompt investigation into the strike. So, look, man, not only have our weapons been hitting civilian targets in Yemen, the effect of this war that we are de facto supporting Saudi Arabia in perpetrating against the Yemeni people, against the Houthi rebels, right? We have millions of people, innocent civilians in Yemen, that are starving to death. It is a humanitarian disaster that's going on right now. And here you have members of the government, right? Mr. Votel, who was saying, and again, this is General Joseph Votel, head of U.S. Central Command. It's a government official saying, I don't know. Look, we just refuel them. That's all we want. That's all we do. I mean, I guess some of our weapons end up being used against civilians, but I'm sure it was an accident. Sure, yeah, of course, right? Now, here's the thing. Now, on the media angle of it, and I mentioned that you don't hear a lot of it on the media. Do you hear stuff like this on Fox News? No. You know the famine that's going on in Yemen is actually worse than what's going on in Venezuela? And again, Fox News talks about Venezuela 24/7. Oh, they've lost 23 pounds. They're eating rats. Well, here you have millions of people in Yemen that are dying from lack of food. It is worse in Yemen. Do you hear Fox News talking about that? No. You hear other media outlets really talking about that? No. MSNBC, do they talk about it? I think once in a great while they'll do a story on Yemen. Once in a great while. You don't hear about it anywhere except for independent media, places like The Intercept. And now you have Congress that's getting involved. And look, let me go in here and give another Democrat credit here. So now Warren has joined up with Robert Menendez, Senator Robert Menendez. Now, Menendez is actually holding up a multi-billion-dollar arms deal to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates until the Trump administration answers his questions about civilian casualties and what our actual strategy is in this war. That, again, is devastating, that we shouldn't be in at all. Now, Menendez wrote in a letter to Defense Secretary James Mattis and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, quote, "I am concerned that our policies are enabling perpetuation of a conflict that has resulted in the world's worst humanitarian crisis." Well, you should be worried. Because that's exactly what we're doing. We are helping this humanitarian crisis. We are helping a brutal regime in Saudi Arabia crush people in Yemen because the Houthi rebels had the audacity to overthrow a Saudi a king that favors Saudi Arabia. Oh, how dare we do that? We're going to go and bomb Yemen for that. It's disastrous, man. We shouldn't be involved in this at all. This war is an atrocity, and it should not continue. It should not stand. And we certainly should not be helping them by exporting weapons. And yet, unfortunately, weapons seem to be our biggest export, aside from our own disastrous wars. So that's why I actually do got to give big credit to both Senator Menendez and Senator Warren. I mean, look, you have the defense industry that's actually a gigantic donor. It's a top donor to both. Look, both Republicans and Democrats take defense contractor money. And so here you have Democrats that are actually, even though their donations are on the line. I don't know if Elizabeth Warren takes donations from from these defense contractors, but it's possible Menendez does. And nonetheless, these are two of the Democrats that actually stand out and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this is a bad idea. So at least we're questioning now what our role is. It is too late. I mean, it's very late to start questioning, but at the same time, at least they're starting to question what's going on there and maybe eventually putting a stop to it. And we can do so by not actually selling arms, selling weapons to all these different countries. I know the defense contractors are like, no, how are we going to make a profit if we're not selling weapons to brutal regimes in the Middle East? Well, look, that's a bigger issue. That involves getting money out of politics. And so that's a long fight ahead of us when it comes to taking that on. But at least the first step starts with trying to question what our intelligence knows, what our generals know, what our military is doing, and why. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.